Welcome to the debate. You know, if you are an experienced executive coach listening to this right now, you undoubtedly know this exact, quietly unsettling feeling,
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there.
right? You finished a session that felt, incredibly meaningful. Your client had this moment of profound clarity. They made a firm commitment to change a behavior. Perhaps they even shed a tear.
Yeah, the classic breakthrough moment.
Exactly. So you write up your notes, you schedule the next appointment, and you feel genuinely good about the work. But then, fast forward maybe 3 sessions or 2 months later, and you realize something deeply disheartening. You are having a variation of the exact same conversation.
Ah, the recycled conversation. I mean, we all have a client like this. Let's call him Dave.
Dave is a great example. Right. Dave promises every Tuesday he's going to finally delegate his inbox and, empower his team. And then every Thursday he is right back in the weeds, micromanaging.
Completely in the weeds.
The themes are identical, the emotional weight feels entirely recycled, and as a coach, you realize the client is just circling the exact same territory. It is, frankly, incredibly frustrating.
Exactly. And that universal frustration brings us to our focus today. We are looking at the intersection of artificial intelligence and executive coaching, specifically examining pattern analysis tools.
Which is a huge, sort of controversial shift in the industry right now.
It really is. We're going to use the mechanics behind a platform called Coach Oracle to anchor this discussion. These tools are attempting to bridge the gap between having those good sessions we just described and facilitating actual measurable transformation. Right, by analyzing conversational data.
Yes, analyzing that data and session notes over a long period of time. So the central question we are exploring is this. Do AI-powered pattern intelligence tools fundamentally elevate a coach's ability to guide transformation by surfacing invisible data? Or do they risk creating a false sense of objective evidence by over-relying on the coach's inherently subjective session notes?
It's a massive question for the future of our profession. Truly.
I'll lay my cards on the table first. I argue that human memory is structurally limited. We simply cannot hold all this data in our heads.
Fair enough.
So treating our session notes as a localized intelligence layer is absolutely essential, to track commitments, catch contradictions, and document genuine breakthroughs that would otherwise just vanish into thin air.
And I argue that while tracking is undoubtedly useful, using algorithms to mine a coach's subjective notes for quote-unquote evidence is dangerous. It risks overly intellectualizing the normal human messiness of the coaching relationship. I mean, we are coaching human beings, not optimizing a supply chain.
I hear that, but to truly understand what is at stake here, I think we have to admit a structural limitation built into the very fabric of traditional coaching.
Which is what exactly?
Well, by design, coaching sessions are isolated events. You meet for an hour, you take notes, and then those notes are scattered across different files, notebooks, or Word documents.
Yeah, the administrative chaos.
Right. Because of this fragmentation, coaches are effectively forced to rely on memory, intuition, and, quite frankly, luck to spot multi-session patterns.
Sure, I won't argue that organization is a problem.
But it's more than just organization. If you walk into any discussion today about tools for executive coaches, you'll find they are almost exclusively solving administrative problems. CRM tools manage your relationships, scheduling apps book your time, payment systems process your invoices.
They make you a better business owner.
Exactly. But they do absolutely nothing to make you a better coach. Efficiency is not depth. A true intelligence layer transforms passive session data into active insights.
But active insights based on what?
Based on accumulated data, it holds and analyzes it so that a coach can walk into a room with the courage to bring documented evidence of a behavioral pattern to a client, rather than just relying on a vague, easily dismissed hunch.
I come at it from a different way, though. I certainly acknowledge the problem. The sheer cognitive load of managing 20 or 30 executives, remembering their spouses' names, their core triggers, their strategic goals, it's immense.
It's exhausting.
It really is. But the foundational premise of these algorithmic pattern matching tools contains a massive glaring blind spot.
Okay, what's the blind spot?
The AI does not read the client. The AI reads the accumulated session notes. And we have to be honest with ourselves here. Session notes are not an objective transcript of reality.
Well, no, of course not.
Right. They are a highly curated, highly subjective filtering of events. They go through the lens of the coach's own biases, fatigue levels, and preferred theoretical frameworks.
Sure, there's a human element.
A huge human element. If I'm tired on a Friday afternoon, my notes look very different than on a Tuesday morning. When we present an algorithmic text analysis of those subjective notes to a client and call it documented evidence, we risk simply amplifying what we chose to write down in the first place.
You think it creates an echo chamber?
Exactly. We risk distancing ourselves from the organic, intuitive, deeply human presence that actually drives transformation. We're replacing it with a clinical, intellectualized readout.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame the nature of the data differently. Let's look at how this actually plays out with internal contradictions. Because I think we both agree that navigating contradictions is where some of the deepest coaching work happens, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's the core of the work.
While contradictions rarely announce themselves cleanly in a single session, they don't just wave a flag. They are buried in everyday language across months. We see this all the time.
Yeah, the classic disconnects.
Right, like the classic example of the executive who repeatedly says they want financial freedom and to scale their business, but then, in completely separate conversations, they express deep discomfort with the idea of charging more for their services.
Or the leader who demands autonomy from their board, but when given it, consistently describes the experience as overwhelming.
Yes, exactly. These tensions are incredibly difficult to spot because each statement, in isolation, sounds perfectly reasonable to the human ear. And to be clear for everyone, the AI we are talking about isn't just doing keyword matching.
It's not just Control F.
Now, a localized LLM is doing semantic analysis. It understands the emotional weight and context of the word overwhelmed in March versus autonomous in November, connecting them invisibly.
I see the mechanics of it, sure.
Having an intelligence layer that detects these underlying contradictions allows the coach to approach these tensions with curiosity rather than confrontation. You aren't accusing the client of hypocrisy. You are bringing forward data that says, hey, here are two things you've said over the last 6 months that seem to pull in opposite directions. Let's look at that.
I have to admit, I'm genuinely struggling with this. Part of me hears pattern detection and thinks, great, I won't lose track of these disparate threads.
Right, which is a relief.
It is. But the other part of me thinks we are outsourcing our human intuition to a machine and fundamentally misunderstanding the nature of contradictions in the process.
Misunderstanding how?
Well, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy the premise that a contradiction is a puzzle to be solved by an algorithm. It is an inherent feature of the human condition. Contradictions are not logical errors in a software code.
I'm not saying they're errors.
But the tool treats them like they are. They are the normal human messiness of having conflicting needs and beliefs simultaneously. I can want autonomy and be terrified of it at the same time. That's not a bug. That's just being alive.
I agree with that.
So when an AI flags these and a coach brings them to the table as surfaced data, you fundamentally alter the power dynamic of the room.
How so?
You shift the dynamic from compassionate witnessing, where a coach simply sits with a client in their complexity, to a cross-examination. It becomes, well, my algorithm caught you saying X in March and Y in November. Explain yourself. That is a massive over-intellectualization of a deeply emotional state.
Okay, I see why you think that, and the risk of turning a session into a deposition is real if the coach lacks empathy. But let me give you a different perspective. Think of this pattern tool like a medical chart.
A medical chart, okay.
Yeah. If a doctor is treating a patient with a slow-moving chronic condition, they absolutely rely on a complete longitudinal chart. They need it to spot the gradual decline or the hidden correlations that are invisible on a day-to-day basis.
Right, because memory fails.
Exactly. The doctor doesn't remember your blood pressure from 3 years ago, but the chart does. Just as a doctor needs that cross-session data to spot the chronic physical condition, a coach needs cross-session data to spot a chronic behavioral loop that the client themselves cannot see.
I'm not sure I like this analogy.
Just think about our guy Dave from earlier. The executive who constantly plans to delegate his inbox finds a perfectly valid and urgent reason to delay it this week and then pivots to a new operational crisis the next month. He is trapped in a chronic loop.
He certainly is.
The AI isn't cross-examining him. It's providing the longitudinal chart so the coach can finally treat the underlying chronic avoidance, rather than just treating the acute symptom, the crisis of the week, over and over again.
I like the medical chart idea in theory, but here is exactly where it breaks down for me. Medicine is a hard science, dealing with measurable biological markers. Blood pressure is objective.
Coaching has objective elements too.
No, executive coaching is a highly subjective, nuanced exploration of human psychology and leadership. When we start treating coaching like medicine, we pathologize normal psychological exploration. We are not treating a disease.
I'm not saying we are.
But the framework implies it. And we see this exact risk in how these tools handle what is often called the commitment problem.
But wait, the commitment tracking is arguably the most revealing psychological window we have.
Is it though?
Think about the mechanics of a standard coaching engagement. Almost every session ends with a commitment. The client states what they will do before the next session, and the coach writes it down. But the vital question is what actually gets done? And more importantly, what doesn't get done and why?
Right. Follow through.
Yes, a platform like Coach Oracle tracks whether commitments are completed, carried forward, modified, or quietly dropped over time. Doing this manually across a full caseload of executives is practically impossible. Your brain just drops the threads.
That is true. Memory has its limits.
But automatically tracking this reveals deep psychological insights. We don't drop commitments because we forget. We drop them because we are avoiding something. A client who consistently makes highly ambitious commitments but quietly drops them isn't just suffering from poor time management.
No, they're usually scared.
Exactly. They might be using the act of commitment making to feel productive in the room, without ever taking the actual risks required for action out in the real world. You need the data to see the shape of that avoidance.
I agree entirely that commitment follow-through is revealing. It's often where the rubber meets the road. Where we diverge is on the rigidity of the algorithmic framework, applying labels to this behavior.
What do you mean by rigidity?
Well, what a system neatly labels on a dashboard as consistent avoidance of a goal or a quietly dropped commitment might actually be the client's deep intuitive realization that the goal is simply wrong for them.
Okay, that's possible.
Human beings are incredibly fluid. Often, we state a goal because we feel we should want it. Society tells us we should want to scale our business or we should want a promotion. And our failure to act on that commitment is actually our subconscious wisely steering us away from a path that doesn't align with our true values.
So you think tracking it ruins that process?
Yes. When you introduce data tagging, you obscure that beautiful, necessary nuance. You train the coach to look at the dashboard metric, Dave has 4 drop commitments this quarter, instead of leaning into the fluid reality of Dave's evolving desires.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're assuming the tool replaces the coach's judgment.
It heavily influences it, though.
But the intelligence layer doesn't tell the coach why the commitment was dropped. It merely ensures the dropped commitment isn't forgotten by a fallible human memory.
It still centers the metric.
If the tool simply serves as a mirror, flawlessly reflecting the dropped commitments back to the coach so they can ask the client about them, how is that anything but an enhancement of the coach's intuition?
A mirror.
Yes, it gives the coach the raw material to ask the exact question you're posing. Dave, I noticed we've carried this goal forward 3 times and now it's dropped off the radar. Are you avoiding this because it's scary, or is this simply the wrong goal for you? You literally cannot ask that powerful question if you've forgotten the commitment existed in the first place.
You know, that's a fair point. It is an enhancement of memory, yes, and asking that specific question is great coaching.
Thank you.
But, and this is a big but, it is not a neutral mirror. It is a mirror that highlights certain measurable metrics over unmeasurable qualities. And this brings us to how this data is ultimately packaged and presented back to the client, specifically through things like transformation reports.
Which are incredibly useful.
If we follow your logic to its natural conclusion, what happens when we take that algorithmic reflection and hand it to the client? Or worse, to a third party?
Which I would argue is vital.
One of the most underappreciated challenges in executive coaching is that transformation is usually completely invisible to the person experiencing it.
Because it's slow.
Right. Psychological growth happens so gradually, like hair growing. You don't notice it day to day. Clients who have made enormous progress often lose motivation because they compare their current state to their idealized future state rather than to their starting point. They literally forget who they used to be 6 months ago.
I've seen that happen, yes.
Documenting evidence of belief shifts and breakthroughs solves this. It provides actual, concrete proof of change. And before you raise the entirely valid concern about the privacy implications of feeding a client's deepest vulnerabilities into an AI to generate these reports,
Oh, I was definitely going to bring that up.
I know you were. We must address how this specific technology handles it, which is crucial for anyone listening who is skeptical of AI. Tools like Coach Oracle can run entirely locally, for instance, right on a coach's own WordPress site.
Which is unique.
Very unique. It solves the massive privacy dilemma of cloud-based AI by ensuring that highly sensitive, vulnerable client data never passes through third-party servers. The semantic analysis happens locally on your own environment. No massive tech corporation is scraping your client's deepest fears about their marriage or their board of directors to train the next public LLM.
I'll give you that. Running this locally so client data isn't floating around in the cloud is a huge win for privacy. It is a massive, necessary advantage over the vast majority of AI tools in the market today.
Exactly.
The implications of uploading private coaching notes to a third-party server are staggering, and the fact that this architecture circumvents that is highly commendable. That is a compelling argument for the safety of the data.
Thank you.
But let's look at the application of it. Let's look at those transformation reports. Providing a summary for the client is one thing, but these structured summaries are often designed to demonstrate ROI, return on investment, to referral partners, HR departments, or the executive's boss who is footing the bill.
Accountability matters in business, though.
This is where I fundamentally push back. When you standardize a deeply personal, complex, non-linear human journey into a structured summary of patterns shifted and commitments met to show a corporate sponsor, you are commodifying human growth.
Oh, I think that's too harsh.
I don't think it is. You're turning a sacred, private transformation into a clean, marketable receipt. It changes the meaning of the work from a transformational relationship into a measurable deliverable.
I think that's a highly cynical read on the desire to make progress visible. Let's use an analogy. Think of it like a photograph taken at the base of a massive mountain and another photograph taken near the summit.
Okay, the mountain.
Handing those photographs to a climber who is freezing, exhausted, and feels like they haven't moved an inch in hours isn't commodifying the hike. It is providing necessary evidence of the altitude gained. It is an act of profound support.
If they are the only ones looking at it.
Even still, in a world where executive coaching is a significant investment of time, money, and emotional energy, being able to concretely say, here is where you were when we started, here are the limiting beliefs that shifted, here is the evidence of your growth over the last year. That honors the work. It doesn't cheapen it, it grounds it in reality. It tells the exhausted climber they are actually getting somewhere.
But the mountain is a physical reality. The altitude can be measured by anyone with an altimeter. Psychological growth is not a mountain. It is an internal landscape.
But it has external outputs.
Not always measurable ones. When we rely on an AI to generate a report of that internal landscape, we are training coaches and clients alike to value only the growth that can be algorithmically parsed. What happens to the quiet, unquantifiable shifts in a client's presence?
Such as?
The slight softening of their defensiveness on receiving feedback, the way they hold eye contact differently than they did in January. Those things don't always generate the linguistic markers that a breakthrough detection algorithm is scanning for.
I see your point, but
My fear is that by optimizing our tools for the measurable, we lose our reverence for the unmeasurable. We start managing to the metric.
yet I would counter that those quiet, unquantifiable shifts often do have linguistic markers. The softening of defensiveness shows up in how they describe a conflict with a peer,
And because the coach is fully present in the room, following the energy, holding eye contact, staying with the client, they aren't stopping to annotate every subtle shift. They are just coaching.
Right, as they should be.
Exactly. The intelligence layer catches what the distracted, heavily burdened human mind misses in retrospect. To summarize my position, human memory is fundamentally unequipped to hold months of complex conversational data. We drop threads. We miss longitudinal patterns. Privacy-first intelligence layers don't replace the coach. They give coaches the courage to operate on specific, documented evidence rather than vague, fleeting intuition.
And to summarize mine, while the localized privacy infrastructure is indeed a benchmark others should absolutely follow, coaches must remain eternally vigilant. We must ensure that algorithms analyzing our own subjective notes do not replace the deeply human, unstructured art of witnessing a client's messy reality. The map is not the territory, and an algorithmic summary of our notes is not the client.
We certainly converge on the absolute necessity of client privacy, and I think we agree on the biological reality that human memory drops vital details over time.
Absolutely. We are fallible creatures. I don't dispute that we need help remembering. Where we continue to diverge is whether algorithmic insight fundamentally deepens the coaching relationship, or if it risks creating a sterile, over-intellectualized environment that values metrics over profound human connection.
The future of the executive coaching profession is incredibly complex as these technologies evolve, and there is clearly much more to explore regarding AI's ultimate role in human connection. We will leave it to our listeners to determine how data and intuition should balance in the pursuit of transformation. But the next time you finish a great session, only to realize you had that exact same conversation with that exact same client 2 months ago, ask yourself, what else might you be missing?